Hi. Um, Tonight is. Ooh, it's already the 14th of April. But this recording will be for the 13th because it's like 3 a.m. in the morning. So we'll count it as yesterday's recording. Now, I just double checked before starting to record this video that the audio and video quality is fine and it's not too bad. I'm recording this on my Samsung phone instead of my actual camera, and the quality looks quite good. Um, you know, quality is usually fine as long as you have good lighting, and I have a bit of a light here, so it should be all right. As for audio quality, can't guarantee. No lav mic today, just run and gun recording tonight because it's quite late. So what did I want to talk about tonight? First is probably my plans for my off-the-cuff videos when I'm in Tasmania for a family holiday. I think I'll probably not do them, but if I get some privacy, I will try my best. And yeah, the video quality will probably just be the worst possible, but it's fine. I'll try my best to get content out so that I can keep up this tradition and keep it up, especially when I come back from the trip, so I don't just forget about it. So, what do we have to talk about tonight? I wanted to talk today about identity. I didn't have the strongest I didn't feel strongly compelled to talk about any topic in particular, but last time I said I would talk about identity and how that affects our beliefs. Now, I don't want to dive into the philosophy of identity at all tonight, or maybe I will a little bit. I think for context, I'll just tell you a little bit about my philosophy of identity. And I subscribe to what's called the bundle theory of identity, that there's no real metaphysical truth, there's no deep metaphysical truth behind what makes us us. So there's no soul, there's no special entity, Craig, that carries throughout time. Like, I am merely just a bundle of properties, and that's what makes up my identity. So yeah, and how does that? I mean, it doesn't necessarily directly affect what I'm talking about, but I think it's just good to know if you're watching, and if I am watching from the future. On another note, I wanted to talk about how we form our beliefs, right? So in large part, the formation of our beliefs comes from identity. So a lot of how we form our beliefs comes from what we think we are. So say you start to be convinced of leftist or rightist ideal, let's say right-wing ideals, and you start calling yourself a conservative. And the instant you start calling yourself a conservative is the instant that you lose your ability to think freely in a way that's not biased. So say I call myself conservative because I agree with so I have a fundamental agreement with the fact that marriage should marriages should stay together rather than divorcing, for example, and that's like a pretty like weak conservative view. It's not a strong conservative view like anti-abortionism or anti-gay marriage, for example. So it's a small conservative belief, but say you have that belief and say several other soft conservative beliefs, you might start calling yourself a conservative at that point, because that's the kind of label that is given to those beliefs. And the instant you do that, as I said, you kind of lose your freedom of thought, because now you're grouping yourself in with a bunch of these other people who have similar but typically not really the same beliefs. So you get probably stronger conservatives, and you get conservatives that that also like are interested in certain other like topics, say like abortion, when you're coming into conservatism from marriage, or like, you know, Christianity, religion and whatnot. So yeah, it might basically, when you call yourself a conservative, you also adopt, or you don't necessarily adopt, but you have a greater tendency to adopt certain beliefs, because it makes you feel like you have a strong sense of identity, right? So if I call myself a conservative and then I believe in a bunch of like left-wing views, then I can't really call myself a conservative, and I can't really call myself anything at that point, which is like rough for your identity, because then you feel kind of like empty. You feel like you have no identity, and because of that, you feel like you kind of have an identity crisis, right? You feel like you don't know who you are, and that's very troubling for the human mind. So yeah, so you tend to adopt views that conform to what you call yourself, and when you start calling yourself this and that, you tend to adopt these ideas much more easily. You tend to accept ideas from people who are in the same kind of like group as you. So if you are a leftist, you're more likely to listen to leftists, which can further indoctrinate you and keep pushing you to the extreme left. And the same is true with the right, because you identify as a rightist, you get pushed towards more extreme rightist ideals. When I called myself a conservative at one point, I kept consuming conservative media due to confirmation bias, right? I wanted to confirm the things that I believed are true. I wanted to confirm my identity. And so I consumed lots of basically fake news and misinformation. So there was, I especially remember one time when I watched that one PragerU video about climate change. And they said, climate change is good, because climate change produces more CO2, there's more fuel for the trees to grow, and trees will grow at a faster rate, and there's more trees than there have ever been. and that's very problematic, because it's just not true in a lot of ways. So you can kind of see how, like, I watched PragerU, and like people like Ben Shapiro and Louder of Crowder, because I identified as a conservative, rather than because I thought they were good, like they were trustworthy. So they were there to confirm my beliefs, and they kept confirming beliefs that were like more radical than before. And so when I realized this at some point, probably having all sorts of realizations at that point, reading a lot of self-help, which is essentially, if you read good self-help, that's essentially philosophy and psychology boiled down to the layman. So that's good. And I learned kind of how to think for myself better. And when I was writing my blog back in the day, must have been a couple years ago, maybe 1 to 2 years ago now at this point, I wrote about, I wrote that, and I had the realization that you should just never kind of identify with any particular group. You should never call yourself something. Like, you should never say, I am a conservative, I am a leftist, I am a communist, because it puts you in a box, not just societally, but just even for your own mind. like it's like, let's just talk about socially first. Um, the general public has a preconceived notion of that idea, has a preconceived notion of communists, and they apply that ideal to you. They apply or everything they know about communism to what they think you believe, and that's just simply not true, because people have a very diverse set of beliefs that don't always conform to um, what you can simply put on a label. Like, you cannot describe all my beliefs by just saying I'm a communist, for example. And so yeah, so I realized that you should just not identify with groups if you want to be understood properly by like people, and you want to freely think without bias. Um, and sometimes I do call myself certain things to make it easier to explain my viewpoint, but I think just to yourself, you should never call yourself something, because it really limits your worldview. It really limits your scope, right? And yeah, that's a pretty simple rundown of why you should not identify with movements. Should not identify with things, and that also extends to brands. You should not identify with brands because they're just, capitalist money making machine, but you kind of miss out on what's actually good, right? You become like a loyal slave, no servant to a company first of all, which is terrible, and then it doesn't bring you really any benefit, and then you keep consuming goods that you don't need, and the list goes on. Yeah. And also, I guess when you do that, it puts you more and more into the confines of our society, right? Like such ideas, such as such political ideas, such as leftism, rightism, Appleism, Samsungism, whatever, right? These are all merely concepts of society. These are not real things. These are not tangible. They're not real philosophically. They're not valuable in the way I define value, such that they're valuable they're useful in most contexts, as many contexts as possible. These identifications of yourself are not really valuable. So the value of your identity needs to kind of depend on things that don't rely on society. They need to depend on like the way you handle your thoughts and the meaning of your life, for example. These things are always valuable despite the context, unlike Samsungism, because in 99, in like, say if you had multiverse theory, I'd say in most multiverse, in most universes, you wouldn't have a Samsung and an Apple, so it's not really valuable. But in all universes, you have life, presumably, or all important universes, I guess, you would have life, and the question of meaning and identity always comes up in life, given sufficient cerebral capacity, or self-consciousness, right? So yeah, what I'm saying is just don't identify with the shit. That's how you get indoctrinated. That's how you become a member of the socialist alternative or the conservatives club. That's how you don't see both sides of a story and don't form a balanced opinion. So yeah, think for yourself. Don't form an identity based off of buzzwords. Your identity and your beliefs are much more complicated than can be described in a few words. So it's simply best not to do that. And another trick that I've used at some points is that if you want to want to describe your beliefs simply without having to spiel about the problems of identifying with things, you can just say, oh, I kind of like Buddhism, I kind of like leftism, communism, whatever, or I believe in it. No, maybe not that. Yeah, I kind of like it, and that defeats like being hurt if when your ideals are attacked. So I say I'm a Christian, you kind of argue against Christianity, and then I'll be attacked, right? But if you say I kind of like Christianity, then you won't be so attacked. Like it's not a I guess you're not directly being attacked because you only like it, right? You only like certain aspects of it. For example, I think a better example would be, yeah, kind of like communism. If people say I hate communists, you're not a communist, right? You just like communism a little bit. That's not the greatest example, but what I'm saying is that one of the big problems of identifying with the groups is that, again, that bias, right? It's that you start to have an emotional attachment to that identity, and so it becomes important for you to defend your identity, just like it is important for you to defend your ego. So then you kind of get emotional and thus illogical when defending. So if you say I'm a communist, and people will say I don't like communists, then you'll feel offended and you'll feel defensive, and you won't be logical. But if you say, if you kind of detach yourself from that, say I like communism, no, I agree with some of the ideas of communism, then you become much more open to kind of like, what do you call it? Open to discussion. You seem more open-minded, right? And then the person who's arguing with you, doesn't feel like they're like attacking you personally. They don't feel like they're really gaining, or if they do want to feel like they're attacking a communist, then they don't feel like that if you don't identify as a communist, right? So it's just kind of great on all sides, the person attacking communism, for example, will see that you're not riled up, and you can have a better discussion about it. If they see you're riled up, they'll just dismiss your points as irrational because you're emotional, right? And so your point will never get through. So you can see how, in many ways, even if you do want to convince people of your ideas, it's still beneficial mostly to not identify with those groups. And in a Nietzschean sense, you should just go your own way. You should not follow the herd. The herd doesn't lead to the good things. Well, you have the most freedom if you don't, at least. Yeah. Again, don't want to drag this on for too long, and hope the video quality is being fine. But yeah, again, if you have any questions about identity, what I've talked about, just leave them in the comments or message me directly, and I'll be happy to answer them. I can maybe link you to some of my blog posts regarding that, but fair warning that they're quite old, so it might not reflect exactly what I think now. Alright. Hope it's been good. Hope this new video quality is not being too jarring. And I'll see you tomorrow maybe. Though tomorrow is the night before I leave. I fly to Tasmania at 5 in the morning. Well, I leave at 5 in the morning. So, yeah. Anyway, fingers crossed I'll have the time to do this in Tasmania. But no guarantees. I'll try my best. Good night.